that this is being recorded. And the other sort of housekeeping note is that as questions come up for people throughout the session, we ask that you drop them in the chat so that you don't have to worry about remembering them, and then we will answer all of the questions at the end, but we'll be monitoring them throughout the presentation. And the run of show is a general introduction to the business enhancement grant opportunity, and then the question and answer. Yeah, Claire, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name's Claire Salerno. I'm calling in from Waterville, Vermont today, where I live, and I am an agriculture development specialist at the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, and I support the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative.
And hi, everybody. I'm Diana Ferguson. I'm a grants management specialist at the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, also supporting the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative, and really nice to see you all.
Great. I think with that, unless Claire or Diana, you have another housekeeping note that I haven't mentioned, I think we can begin.
Sounds great. I'll pull up the screen right now.
And if you're just joining, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, which is the comic blurb icon on the top right part of your screen. And also that is where you will want to be inputting questions or save them till the end.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, so thanks everyone. Hopefully everyone is here for the webinar on the Working Lands Enterprise Business Enhancement Grant for fiscal year 2023, which is the year we're in now. I think that we already went over all of these, but just to give you a roadmap for our discussion, I'll provide an overview of the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative as a whole, and then we'll talk more specifically about the Business Enhancement Grant that's just coming out now that hopefully you're looking to apply for. Diana will do a quick walkthrough of what the application process looks like, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end. And yeah, feel free to put any questions in the chat as we go, and we'll get to them at the end. Great. So the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative was created in 2012 by the Vermont State Legislature, and we are a state program that manages and invests about $1 million annually into agriculture and forestry-based businesses. To date, the program has awarded about $12 million to businesses all over the state in its 10 years. And this year, in fiscal year 2023, we have $1.6 million available for grants. The overall mission of the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative is to strengthen and grow the economies, cultures, and communities of Vermont's working landscape. And we are governed by the Working Lands Enterprise Board, which achieves this by making essential catalytic investments in critical leverage points of the Vermont farm and forest economy. Yeah, so there's a lot of people involved in the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative, which I don't have on the slide, but is often abbreviated WELI or WELI. So it is jointly run by 3 different state agencies. Diana, Elizabeth, and I are from the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, but we have folks from the Department of Commerce and Community Development and the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation that also support the program. We have support from several business assistance organizations, including the Vermont Agricultural Assistance Corporation out of the Vermont Economic Development Authority, the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, and the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. And so any businesses that apply for a working lands grant or contract, those are reviewed and awarded through a competitive review process that consists of all of these stakeholders from the state agencies, these business organizations, as well as other nonprofit and industry partners. I'm not sure if Diana's frozen, possibly.
Can you hear me, Claire?
Yes. Are you able to go to the next slide?
Yeah, I'm on the next slide. Maybe it's just
Okay.
taking a minute to show up.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Thank you. So the annual grant cycle. So our grants follow the state fiscal year, which is different than the regular calendar year. And the state fiscal year runs from July 1st through June 30th. So right now we're in state fiscal year 2023, which started on July 1st of this year and will go through June 30th of 2023. So in July, the state of Vermont legislature and the governor passed and approved the state budget, and they approved the appropriation to the Working Lands Enterprise Fund for the upcoming fiscal year. And like I mentioned, for this fiscal year, we have $1.6 million available, and that will go across several different grant programs. And during the summer, the Working Lands Enterprise Board, or WLEB, as it's abbreviated here, convenes an annual symposium where they strategize on funding prioritization and decide which grant programs to offer, how much money to put in each grant, and what the minimum and maximum award amounts will be for each grant. During the fall or late summer, early fall, agency staff conduct outreach and webinars to provide guidance on the upcoming application process. So that's what we're doing right now with the Business Enhancement Grant. Also in the late summer and during the fall, the grant requests for applications, which are abbreviated to RFAs, and the contract requests for proposals open. And those are typically posted 3 to 5 weeks prior to the application deadline. And after the application closes, subject matter experts and thought partners, folks from across the farm and food and forest industry and business assistance groups in the state review each completed application and provide a slate of recommendations to the Working Lands Enterprise Board. And then in November and April, the WLEB, the board, makes final award decisions, and we notify applicants by email in the order that RFAs were released and closed. So the business enhancement grants will have notifications about those probably in January. And applicants that aren't successful still receive feedback from the board on their applications, hopefully to strengthen perhaps another application the following year. And after award decisions go out, our staff work with awardees to finalize the grant agreement criteria for awarded projects. So just putting together all of the final paperwork to be signed, and once it's signed, then the project can begin. Great. And so for this year, fiscal year 2023, we have several funding opportunities available. Some of them are the same as we've had in years past. Some of them are new. And so the kind of timeline that I just discussed on the last slide, that general timeline happens every year, but we don't always get the same amount of money every year. We have a base allocation of $1 million from the legislature. Some years we get additional funds on top of that, and some years we don't. And so the Working Lands Enterprise Board makes decisions on which funding opportunities to offer based on what the needs are around the state. So for this year, we had the Service Provider Grant and the Producer Association Grant, which are open right now. And then the grant that we're talking about today, the Business Enhancement Grant, is very similar to a grant formerly known as the Standard Business Grant that some of you may have applied for or received in past years. And the information is all available at that now, and the web portal will actually open next Friday, September 23rd, and remain open until October 28th. New this year is the ARPA-funded Primary Producer Impact Grant, and that will be a 2-phase process. The pre-application will open in later this fall in October and November. And that folks, I know some folks on this call may have questions about that. We're not going to focus too much on it on this call, but certainly if folks are wondering about the difference between that and the business enhancement grant, that grant is only for primary producers, so no processors can apply for that grant, and that will be a larger dollar amount. And then the final grant we'll have this year is the Trade Show Assistance Grant, which is in winter 2023, and that is a smaller grant for businesses to attend trade shows. Great, so eligibility for grants. Again, certain grants are targeted at different groups of people, but regardless, all enterprises must be based in Vermont and registered with the Secretary of State at the time of application submission. Any organizational structure is eligible, so partnership, LLC, sole proprietorship, cooperatives, nonprofits. The important thing is that a business is involved in the support, is involved in influencing Vermont's working landscape. Applicants must be in compliance with all state regulations, so water quality and taxes, and in good standing with the state during the application submission process and remain so during the grant period. I know we've had some questions about this next point. So if you received a Working Land Standard Business Grant or the COVID-19 Response Business Development Grant, you can reapply this year, no matter what year you received that grant. If you received the Supply Chain Impact, Market Level Infrastructure Impact, or a Meat Slaughter and Processing Grant, we ask that you wait 3 years before reapplying for any business grants. So if you received one of those grants in fiscal year 2020 or earlier, then you could reapply this year. And that's just for the larger dollar grants. We know those projects take some time to complete, and just want to give some time for those to be finished before reapplying for more funds. If you have received Working Lands grants in the past, when you apply, it's just important to measure and report on the results of previously funded projects and to demonstrate how a new project might continue to grow something you were working on, or be something completely separate, and just explaining what the distinction might be. As I mentioned, primary producers that are looking for larger dollar amounts may be eligible to apply for the ARPA-funded Primary Producer Impact Grant instead of the Business Enhancement Grant, but all of the things on this checklist would still apply. And so eligible projects, this grant goes from, you can request anywhere from $20,000 to $35,000. It is up to you the amount that you would want to request depending on the budget for your project. A lot of different projects are eligible. The Working Lands Enterprise grants are some of the most flexible funding sources for businesses around the state. So market development is a key area, which would be hiring a professional marketing or branding contractor to help develop strategy or content, as well as implementing any strategy or content that you've developed with a contractor. So that could be branding, website updates, social media development, things like that, anything marketing related. Research and development, so if you're testing a new system or new technology, if there's something you want to pilot to see if it will work well, either with production or processing or anything, then you can certainly apply for a grant for that. We most commonly probably receive infrastructure development projects, so any project-specific planning, permitting, engineering or architectural plans, building and equipment costs are all eligible. Any energy-focused projects, so any energy efficiency, lighting, refrigeration, cooling, heat pumps, solar panels, water management, ventilation, any of those things. So that could include equipment installation or any technical assistance or guidance you might receive. And then the last main bucket would be workforce training and development. So any kind of technical skill training for staff, business management training, business succession planning, which could include hiring a consultant to support any of those processes. Right, and I'll pass it to Diana.
Okay, great. Thank you, Claire. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the more technical sides of the grant application process. So I'll talk about the request for applications, or RFA, and then we'll go into web grants, which is the grants management system that we use to accept applications. So here you have just a snapshot of the home page, or the first and second page of the RFA. It's really meant to be the guiding document for the funding opportunity as a whole. So the RFA for the Business Enhancement Grant has been released, was released on September 9th. So if you haven't read it in full and you intend to apply, we recommend going ahead and doing that. For anyone who's interested in applying, it really has all of your needs, soup to nuts, for what you need to know as an applicant, including all of the questions that you'll need to answer in the application itself. So this is just sort of a rundown of what the RFA contains, the calendar or key dates of the grant opportunity, information about the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative, and some of the things that Claire just reviewed: eligibility as an applicant and what types of projects you can apply for, all the questions that will appear in the grants management system when you are applying for the grant, requirements for reporting if you are to receive a grant, and also some information about how applications are scored, how much weight is given to which particular scoring criteria in scoring your application during the review process. And just a quick note, if you've just joined the call recently, please mute yourself, whether you're on the phone or dialed in through your computer. Please make sure to mute so we don't have any background noise. Thanks, everybody. So expectations for applicants and grantees include a few particular things which are common to Working Lands Enterprise Initiative grants. Goals, performance measures, and outcomes are really critical. They really are sort of the linchpin of your project and help us to understand the need and the cause for your work at this particular phase of your business. And so we're looking for overarching goals that speak to what you hope to achieve through your proposed project. Performance measures, which means sort of the indicator of success that you've chosen for that goal. And we have some examples of that coming up that we can share. And outcomes, meaning what you're intending to achieve after your project is completed, and with numbers assigned to that in a time frame so that we know specifically what you're hoping to achieve with receipt of the funds. Matching funds is a requirement for these grants and for all Working Lands grants at a minimum rate of 100%. And so that means if you are applying for a $25,000 grant, we're anticipating and requiring that you meet that amount with an equal or greater amount in matching funds. So $25,000 minimum then of matching funds supplied by your business. And that can be through a combination of cash and in-kind sources, or it can be fully cash if that's the situation you're in. And so cash sources are things like annual income, funds in the bank, savings, loans, anything that's a hard cash source that is directly related to your project. And in-kind sources are more things that are provided for you: donated goods, volunteer labor, pro bono services. And if you have any questions about your potential matching sources and or any concerns about meeting that requirement as an applicant, then you can certainly reach out to us. Letters of support are strongly encouraged in this application. We really, and the reviewers really, look for demonstration of need of the project and recognition by others in your business community for the development of your business at the phase that you're in. So it's not a requirement, I believe, for this application, but applications will be more competitive for those who have one or more letters. And correct me, Claire, maybe one of them is required this year.
No, none of them are
It's not
required.
required. Okay, no letters of
definitely
support
an
required.
optional piece. Yeah.
Okay, great. But strongly encouraged and helpful for the reviewers to paint the picture of where your project lies. So as I mentioned, we have an example here of a completed goals and outcomes table, which will be very similar to one that you will be asked to complete in the application itself. And then if it's approved for funding, it will appear in your grant agreement. So here's a business who's outlined their goals, performance measures, and expected measurable outcomes for a butcher block top production enterprise. And their goals are related to increasing production, increasing their own purchases of local lumber, and building efficiency in their production time. So as you can see, they've chosen performance measures that match each goal. So for example, the annual production of butcher block tops is going to be measured according to the number of tops produced per year, and their expected outcome is that they're anticipating to increase production from 209 to 230 tops. And on down the line, you can read for yourself. This is an area where we know that it takes some time to get your proposed project into clear wording. And so we hope that this example is helpful to you. And we also have some examples on the Working Lands website through a link that's available in the RFA that help to guide you through some questions you can ask yourself and some additional information about how to form this information if it's not at the ready for you at this point. And we have some questions here. Is the goal clear? Is there a mechanism in place to measure progress? And what are the outcomes in numbers? So hopefully that's fairly clear. A minimum of 3 goals is required and maximum of 5 for this grant application. Documents required in the application process. We have an Act 154 water quality compliance form that's needed for all state of Vermont grantees and contractors. So that's actually in the application itself. When you're in web grants, you'll have the ability to open it. You then complete, sign it, scan it, and re-upload it inside the application. So if you have a scanner on hand, that's preferable. If not, definitely plan ahead to be able to use a friend's or go to the local library to be able to scan and upload this form. Business enhancement grants, which some of you or most of you may be applying for. We're also asking for financial information this year. So we're looking for a profit and loss statement, balance sheet, and expense projections for up to the next 3 years. And those are most preferable to be in a PDF format. So we know that many of you use accounting systems or Excel spreadsheets that generate reports and things like that, which is great. And so if you can get those into PDF format, that's the format that's needed for the reviewers to be able to view that information. So that may take a little bit of time in order to get all of that generated. So we wanted to make sure this is a new requirement for the smaller dollar amount grants this year. So wanted to communicate that up front. And other business grants, including the ARPA primary producer grant that we're talking about, will have some additional requirements in addition to the ones above. If you're selected for a grant, the first thing that we'll ask you to do after congratulations is send us a current W-9 form, and that's an IRS document that you can find online. It needs to have a signature that's current or at least in the past 6 months for us to be able to process it and enter you into the state financial system. A certificate of insurance with your business name is also required, and we have a link here in the PowerPoint, which we can share for attachment C, which is a standard component of all state of Vermont grant agreements that outlines the minimum coverage requirements for liability insurance, workers' compensation, and automobile insurance. There are exceptions if your project that you're proposing doesn't involve, for example, transportation, then you can request a waiver for the automobile insurance requirement. And that's something that you could do by emailing me. But this is all after awarding, but just something to keep in mind that you may want to take a look at the insurance requirements ahead of time. And then an e-signed and fully executed grant agreement is the catalyst for you to be able to begin your work and incur project expenses. So no expenses related to your project can be taken on before your grant agreement is signed, even after you've been notified that you are a grantee legally being underway with your project. can only take place once you have electronically signed the grant agreement, and then our agency has countersigned it, which makes it fully executed. We do have exceptions if someone needs to pre-order something or place an order for a piece of equipment so that they can begin their project on time, or or your project has some other component that requires you to take on an expense before your agreement has been signed. It can be sometimes 6 weeks between when you're notified and the agreement is actually signed. So please let us know in the case that is applicable to you and your business. So now I'm going to transition to talk about the lovely grant management system, Web Grants, which if you've been in it before, I know it was your favorite part of that day because it's just really exciting. And I work in Web Grants every day, and so I'm your tech support person if you're intending to apply and you hit any stumbling blocks or have any questions that can't be answered by the other resources that we have to share. The URL is up here at the top. If you're applying, I recommend just go ahead and save and bookmark because you'll be visiting it multiple times, most likely. And we update announcements on the homepage every now and again as needed. If you have not registered in Web Grants and you're intending to apply for this grant, I'd recommend doing that now. It takes 1 to 2 business days for a new account to be approved. So as the applicant, it will be most helpful for you to be registered and approved before the application opens on the 23rd. So this is the login page. We do also recommend, I'm going to hop out of this presentation and move over to Web Grants while I'm talking about this. So we do recommend that if you are going to have multiple people from your business working on an application, that all of you actually create a Web Grants account. So if you know, for example, your accountant is going to upload the financials, or you have another staff person who's going to help you answer the questions, then please each of you create an individual account in Web Grants, and we can then give you accessibility to your application so that everyone can collaborate together. And that's most helpful to us, especially when it comes to tech support, because then if someone's having an issue, we can be in touch with the right person. And then if you're awarded the grant, then everyone will already be in the system for helping to manage it as well. So here is the login page. I'm going to log in under a test account and just give you a walkthrough of what it is like to access an application. It should only take several minutes, and so hopefully some of you may even be familiar with the system already. If it's been a couple years since you were a grantee or since you applied, the system has undergone a software update and kind of a visual facelift. So late 2020, it looks different than it did then. So just something to note. It takes a little bit of time to get familiar with navigation. So we recommend after you get registered, just poke around and get familiar, but I can take you right to the application itself. So on the left is your navigational buttons in gray here. You'll click on funding opportunities. And the currently posted funding opportunities mean all those that are available to submit an application for through the Agency of Agriculture. So there'll be others open at the same time, but you're going to select the Business Enhancement Grant or whichever other one you're applying for. But today I'm going to select a Producer Association grant just for the purposes of showing you how to access the application. So here we are in the Producer Association Development Grant. It will look very similar. We already have some test applications here, but you won't have that unless you've started one already. Please only create one application. The system hopefully will prevent it, but duplicates are really confusing. So if you're having trouble, then reach out to us rather than starting a new one. So if you scroll down, you will have just sort of an overview of the funding opportunity, some helpful links, links to our website, and the one I want to draw the most attention to is this Web Grants application guide, which is 4th on the list of website links. If you click here, I won't open it now, but if you click here, it's a visual step-by-step guide of how to apply. So if there's someone else who hasn't been able to come to the webinar today, or if you just need a little extra assistance with going step-by-step through the application, it's a great guide to remind you of how to do that. So take some time to get familiar with this. Again, all the information is also in the request for applications document on our website. But the next step you're going to do is click this green button on the right that says Start New Application. And that's going to cue the system to create this application wizard for you. And the first thing that you'll do is enter your application title. And then your name should appear right here. And so then you'll save the form information, which is the green button again on the right. And then it'll take you to a similar screen where it's saved that information and it's asking you, okay, you've already put in your title, so you know you're good there. You're going to make sure that your correct organization is selected. Some folks work for multiple businesses, but hopefully this appears correctly for you. And so you'll save again, save form information at the top right. And this is just telling the system, basically giving the system the backbone of your application before you start. And for most of you, this will be the last step to build the application. For some of you, you'll have additional applicants, other folks who you'd like to collaborate with you on the application. And in that case, if you click into the white box, the names of the other folks in your business who are registered will appear there, and you can select anyone else who you would like to be able to access the application. So save form information one more time. And then you'll get to your application menu or application details. And under here, you'll see, okay, the name of your funding opportunity. So be sure you're applying for the right one. Then you've got down here under components, the name of each individual application form. So the forms for the business enhancement grant will be a little bit different, but fairly similar to the ones listed here. And so you get a message right away that you can't submit the application. Of course, we know that because you haven't started it yet. But what we recommend that you do is take a look through and click on, say, okay, here's the first form, applicant information. When you click on it, it will open up the form and give you all the fields that you need to complete. Everything that's a requirement for you to complete is in this red bolded text on the left. And there are some optional fields which are in black text. So what you'll need to do is go through each field and say you're going to enter your contact information and your business information in this form, and then you're going to save it. This will probably, so this is allowing me to save it even though I have not entered anything. And that's one of the luxuries of working in web grants, is that you can save wherever you are and come back and pick up your application at any given time. So make sure if you are in the middle of a form that you click that green save button at the top right. And then when you come back, you can, even if the system has logged you out, that information will be saved and you can come back and pick up where you left off. So you can do that at any point. If you are done with a form, so say I filled out all of my information and answered all the questions on this form, then you will mark as complete. If you think you have finished it and you haven't, when you click the mark as complete button, you'll get an error message that says you're missing some information in this section. And so then you'll go back and make sure that all your fields are finished. And when they are, it will allow you to mark as complete. And when you've done that, then the system will recognize that, okay, I've done the applicant information form, it's complete, and you'll get a green check mark right there. So the goal is to complete all the forms. Once you have a check mark under every single form that says you've completed the whole application, then this red bar at the top will turn green and it will say application in compliance and ready for submission. And then you will get an orange submit button that will appear right here on towards the top right next to the preview application button. So it does take a little bit of time because folks aren't always excited to log in and out of web grants multiple times to complete an application. We do give you all the application questions in the RFA. So a common tactic is to compose your answers in a Word document or another word processing program, and then log into web grants one time and copy and paste it all in, and then save it and submit it all in one sitting. So it's or somewhere in between. It's totally up to you what your approach is. But that's just one thing that some folks find helpful. So a couple things about web grants. Try not to use your browser's back button. Use the back arrow that's here in web grants to navigate back and forth. Sometimes it will throw you for a loop and you'll end up at a page that you weren't at previously. And so we're aware that there are occasional glitches in the system and you have to do some extra navigation because of that, but that's just the nature of it. And I'm going to go ahead and close out of web grants right now. But since this is recorded, you'll be able to come back and watch the demo at any point if that's helpful to you. And I'm going to go ahead and pull the presentation back up. And while I'm doing that, if anyone has any questions about web grants, let me know. Like I said, there is a little bit of a learning curve, so we recommend that even if you know you're not going to submit your application until pretty close to the deadline, go ahead and get started as soon as you can. And I think that will really help your cause. So, oh, this looks a little funny. Claire and Elizabeth, does the presentation look okay?
Yeah, I just see the title slide, but I think I can go forward. So,
Okay, I'll take it. I'll let you know what I can scroll over to where we were. Hang on one second.
okay,
Okay, here we go.
cool. All right,
All
thanks,
right,
Diana.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so here's a list of applicant resources, and these are all available on our website as well. We're putting together a frequently asked questions page about Working Lands applications, and that hopefully is pretty comprehensive, and we continue to update it as we get additional frequently asked questions. So definitely recommend checking that out. The Agency of Agriculture has a weekly newsletter, and I can put the link in the chat in a minute for you to sign up for that. And so that has information about Working Lands as well as many other grant programs that the Agency of Agriculture Development Division offers, including dairy business innovation, marketing and export, farm to school, things like that. The Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets has a grant funding opportunities calendar. We can also drop the link in the chat as well. And if you want to see that calendar, not on the website, there's also the monthly Ag Review newspaper that the agency puts out, which you can sign up to receive for free as a farm in the mail. You can also receive it online if you prefer. There are a lot of business counseling services available that are often either low cost or no cost. And we have a list of those on our website, and there are other resources on the agency website as well. Working Lands has actually its own standalone website from the agency, and you're welcome to look at those resources. And if you feel like you need additional resources for business planning that can help you write your application, we're happy to connect you to some of those folks. And certainly if you haven't worked with a business planner before, it can be really a great thing for you and your business. That's similar to this business development directory is also a little search tool to help make it easier to find someone who can work with you as a business owner, depending on what it is you need. We've also put together a short FAQ about Act 250. We know a lot of folks have a lot of permits they're applying for and are wondering how that might impact their Working Lands project, or understanding kind of just the order of operations between getting funding and getting a permit and doing a project. So we have an FAQ about that on our website, and we're also happy to work with you to answer questions or point you in the direction of other permitting resources as we can. We are not in the business of permit enforcement over here at Working Lands, and we also are not experts on it, but we are doing our best to try to connect the dots for folks that need it. We also have a Facebook and Instagram page that you can follow us at VT Working Lands. Yeah, and so just some tips for assembling a successful application. Starting early, we highly recommend. There is no applications are not accepted on a rolling basis. So anytime that you submit it before the deadline is fine, but just for your own sanity, we recommend that compiling the documents you need, finalizing your info, updating your business plan, any of that you do earlier rather than later, because certainly we get a lot of requests during the final week and we don't always have time to help everyone that needs it during that last week. And we also want to save you the stress of trying to do everything the day before it's due. If you have to work with other stakeholders setting that up, this is maybe less applicable to these grants, but certainly if you're trying to work with a business planner or contractor or someone else that's going to be really involved in the project, trying to get that set up earlier on is good. As Diana mentioned, registering in web grants as soon as possible. And if there's going to be multiple folks from your organization working in there, that they each register separately, and then we can work with you to make sure everyone's attached to the right application. Probably one of the most important things is reading the full request for applications, which again is that document that we showed you that's posted on the website, and that's really kind of a application guide in terms of all of the eligibility components, the documents that you'll need, all of the questions that will be in the application, the scoring criteria, and what will happen if you are awarded a grant. So really printing that out, keeping that handy, super helpful. Kind of related to that, reading the web grants application guide if you need the technology support. Again, we'll have this recording for you if you want to follow along, or you can reach out to Diana if you need additional assistance with web grants. And then lastly, if you have a lot of questions about the process, you're welcome to set up a one-on-one call with program staff, and we can help talk you through whether or not you're eligible for a grant or which grant you might want to apply for, or just if you have questions about what kinds of things should go in the questions. I will note that in terms of this drafting responses in a separate document, and as you're planning your application, we do have character limits for some of the longer questions. None of the questions are super long. We try to keep them short to make it easy for you. So none of them are longer than a paragraph or two, but just want to make sure that folks take a note of that, so that you don't end up writing too much that is then you have to cut down. So I know we just shared a lot of information, and I'm sure people have questions. And when in doubt in the future, please reach out to us. I'm sort of the entryway into generally getting information about Working Lands as a program and whether you're eligible. So you can reach out to me for that. I will note that I'll be out of the office next week. So please direct those questions to Elizabeth while I'm away. But otherwise, I'm happy to answer questions about that. And then Diana is your point person for web grants and grant administration. And then for folks where there's a lot of questions around eligibility, Elizabeth will join those conversations as needed to provide guidance. So we are definitely here to support you during the process.
Great, thank you. So now is the time for questions. And I think people can either raise their hand or feel free to unmute and ask your question. There have been several questions inserted in the chat, which I believe have all been answered in the chat. So we don't have any unanswered questions at this point in the chat. So the floor is open for anyone who has a question. And you can still feel free to type your question in the chat or unmute and ask the question. All right. Delna, is that
Yes,
the
hi.
correct?
Yes,
Yeah, great.
sorry, I could not find the chat, so maybe I'll just ask.
Yeah, perfect.
I'm a ready-to-eat meals producer, and I'm not a farm person, so I was not sure if this was the right place because I saw fruit production in the email which I got from the Vermont Specialty Food Association.
So I think the question is, do ready-to-eat meal businesses, enterprises qualify for the business enhancement grant? So Claire and Diana, do you guys have precedent on
Yeah,
that?
so
Okay.
we've definitely funded some ready-to-eat meals. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Global Village Foods is the one that comes to the top of my head. They were funded last year. There isn't a specific requirement around food businesses that a certain number of their product is sourced locally, but that does make an application more competitive. So if you're sourcing produce or meat or other products in your ready-to-made meals from Vermont farms, and that would certainly make it more competitive. Diana, did you have anything to add?
No, I think that sums it up. So the underlining of this grant program is the connection to Vermont's working lands, and so I would say if you, Delna, as a prepared foods business or any other business who uses products to create or uses some products to create another final product, as Claire mentioned, sort of as long as there's a connection to ingredients that are produced in Vermont. And I think often they're looking for a significant percentage of your products, or at least the ones you're focusing on within your project, to have their origin in Vermont. Then those are the projects that will be more competitive. So if you'd like to set up a call, often what we do is if you have a question about your project eligibility, we can do a one-on-one call with you for a 15-minute block to talk about specifically what you're proposing and help to give you some guidance if that's helpful.
So how do I do that?
You can just email Claire. Is that okay, Claire?
Yeah.
How do I get her email?
Do you want to go back a slide, Diana? It'll be there. I'll also put it in the chat.
All right, so now we're just going to take questions. People seem to be
Thanks.
primarily inputting them into the chat. So we're just going to take them as they appear. So the first question is, I'm not a grant writer. Is there any help to do that?
So yes, Larry, there are organizations and certainly private grant writers that offer assistance, usually for a cost. We recently connected with the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, who have a program called the READY program, which I can link to in the chat, or I don't know, Claire, if you might want to pull that up, which helps to takes some information from you, and if you're eligible, we'll match you with a consultant who can help you with the grant application. So we as staff can't help prepare applications beyond being able to discuss your project or business eligibility. There's also that
Small business.
I'll put the link in. There's also a page on the Working Lands website that has some links for other organizations that provide business assistance who may have grant writers on staff. And then Elizabeth, what were you going to add?
No, I was just going to ask Claire to put in the link also to the small business offices, which are located regionally, which is very convenient and can offer support in grant writing. So look for the link. Claire just put in the link to the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, which offers support with grant writing, and we'll put in a link for, what is it? The Small Business.
Small Business Development Center.
Small Business Development, and it's actually centers because they're regionally based. So that's a great question, and we really encourage people to reach out to service providers, to business advisors when preparing their application, because it is great to have input and, you know, a professional to talk through your business plan and application with. Okay, the next question is, could you go over the one-to-one funds matching requirement more deeply?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. So the matching requirement for this grant and all Working Lands grants is a 100% match. And that means for every dollar that you apply for / receive in funding, your business has to match $1. So that means by the end of your grant project, if you're selected for funding, by the end of your project, if you have applied for $25,000, you will have expended $50,000 towards the project, and 25 of that will be grant funds that you've been awarded, and the other 25 will be matching funds. So that 25 in matching funds, or whatever amount, is your minimum based on your grant application. So it can be anything above and beyond that, but it has to be at least 100%. Those funds can come from just cash sources, meaning you already have funds in the bank that you're expending towards the project, or it can be cash in a combination of in-kind sources. And so it may be folks who are donating services to your business or to your project. So the caveat is that matching funds have to relate to the project itself. It can't be that you are spending $25,000 on a different part of your business and claiming that as match. It has to be related to the particular project that you're proposing. And so, your own labor is an eligible cost. So, folks are paying themselves at different rates. And so calculating your time and your other staff members' time towards working on the project is a matching cost. And there's plenty of other examples of how you may be contributing cash or in kind. So throughout the life of the project, you will be claiming your grant funds and drawing them down from the state to spend on your project. So you'll be identifying how much you're asking for, and at the same time, identifying how many matching funds you've expended of your own, or the value of the services you've received as a business towards your project collectively. And then by the end, again, it needs to equal at least the same amount that you're receiving from the grant. So hopefully that's helpful. And I do believe we also have a resource about matching. So I'll see if I can look that up, and we're happy to answer more detailed questions on that if needed.
So I think the next questions that are coming up, the grant deadline is October 28th, and successful applicants will be notified in January 2023. Does this grant apply to housing development projects? It does not. This is for farm, food, and forest enterprises. When will the funds be available and how?
I can talk through
Okay.
that if that'd be helpful. Yeah, so the application closes in October. The board will make decisions at their December meeting. The board only meets monthly, so that will have to happen in December. People will be notified in early January, and we'll take January and possibly into February to get all the documents together that Diana described and sign the grant agreement. And once you sign the grant agreement, you will go into Web Grants, the same system that you used to apply, and file a claim to receive. It's typically 40% of your grant amount. So if you have a $20,000 grant, I believe that would be $8,000. And so you will file the claim, which is a pretty simple process. And then you will receive your check in the mail, or if you prefer to receive it via direct deposit, you can sign up for that. And that's something that we would provide guidance on when you're awarded the grant. So that can sometimes take about 2 weeks, 10 business days, sometimes a little bit longer, depending on the number of claims we have and how busy our business office is. The way it works is we approve a claim, and then it has to go to our business office within the Agency of Agriculture and then to the Department of Finance. So we're not the ones that actually hold all of the money between Elizabeth, Diana, and I. So that's why it can sometimes take time, but we would go over all of that in an orientation once you receive your award.
Great. So the next question is, does the proposed project have to be completed during the fiscal year that the grant is funded? So correct me if I misspeak, Claire and Diana, but the estimated project start date is February. And this is a 12-month you have 12 months. You should plan your timeline around a 12-month timeline. So you would want to start that timeline in February or March, and it is not, the funds do not have to be spent in alignment with the fiscal year. Is that correct? Okay. Does this grant apply to beverage rectifiers? I've never even heard of that. Using a Vermont-made product based on a value-added final product. So does this grant apply to beverage rectifiers using a Vermont-made product based as a value-added final product?
I think if I understand correctly, the answer would be yes.
Yes.
The example I'll give is I think we funded in the past the SAP maple soda, maple seltzer company, if folks have heard of that. So they use Vermont sap to produce their product. We've also funded Artisano kombucha, or Keep It Simple kombucha. And they use Vermont honey as well as some other Vermont herbs, I believe, in their beverage. So that would be eligible.
Okay.
I'm also seeing that it's 1 o'clock, so if anyone needs to leave, you can certainly do so. We're happy to stay on and answer these questions that are still in the chat, or any additional questions, but no one's obligated to stay, and we've kept the recording going. So if you want to see those later, you can watch it.
Another question. So the final question in the chat at the moment is, if the timing of grant funds availability is after I need to pay for certain grant covered expenses, will I get reimbursed? So I think the question is, if, you know, somebody is spending money prior to signing the grant agreement, will they be reimbursed? And I believe the answer is no. Is that correct, Diana and Claire?
Right. So there's a few different scenarios that could play out here. One could be if just the timeline of the grant itself doesn't line up with the needs of your project, and say, you know, you really need to purchase something at the time you're submitting an application, that would not be an eligible project cost. But if, for example, you're awarded a grant and you really need to get started right away, but you don't have a signed grant agreement yet, typically we say you need to wait that 4 to 6 weeks. But if that's going to influence your project negatively, or if you absolutely have to order something or start incurring expenses before your grant agreement is signed, but after you've been notified, so we're talking January to February, then we can have a conversation about what that need is and why, and we can adjust your grant agreement to accommodate for that. But other than that, no grant funds or matching funds can be expended before you've been notified of receiving the award, and preferably before the grant agreement has been signed, which should be somewhere around mid-February. But you know, there's annual opportunities, and there'll be another round of funding next year. So if the timing doesn't line up, it's still okay to get your ducks in a row and see what else becomes available. I did see one question further up, Elizabeth. How are successful applicants selected? And is there a rating scale for each application? So that is in the RFA. Towards the bottom, there's a section about scoring criteria, and there are categories for scoring with point values assigned. And so you'll see, you know, clarity of application and innovation and goals and outcomes, budget, and all the different components of the application that reviewers will be looking at. And for each category, it might say 20 points. The reviewer might have 4 questions, and each of them are worth 5 points. So we don't give you the specific questions, but we do give you the guidelines as far as which criteria are going to be scored and how many total points will be assigned. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thanks for catching that, Diana. So there are no more questions in the chat. And again, if anyone has a last question, feel free to unmute or pop a question in the chat. Otherwise, we'll give it a moment. So any last questions? And again, feel free to contact myself, Claire, or Diana. Diana specifically for web grant assistance, Claire and I for programmatic questions around the business enhancement grant. At any point around questions that come up for you within the process. And thank you very much for participating today. We certainly hope it's been helpful. And as we already mentioned, this conversation will be recorded and available on the website if you would like to review. Any other closing comments, Claire or Diana?
I don't think so. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll be sure to share these this recording on our website. And like Elizabeth said, please feel free to reach out to us with any other questions.
There was one last question that was just popped in, and the question was, how many grants are awarded? We have up to $450,000 to award. So the number of awards depends on the reviewer and approval process. So there's not a fixed number of awards. All right, thank you everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.